take a couple of pills or a few pills. But the one constant for me was I always just smoked a lot of dope. No, right, I need to stop a bit. I need to slow down. But then as soon as I wouldn't be stoned anymore, I'd want to be smoking again.
Hello and welcome to Wellbeing. I'm Jack Hodgins. Today we are beginning a two-part episode looking into the experiences of living with a drug dependence. We are joined by Grant, who has experienced drug dependence since his early adolescence until reaching sobriety recently. Follow his story in this edition of Wellbeing, from the rise of the addiction to the light at the end of the tunnel. Also, please be advised that there may be some coarse language in this program. Hello, Grant, and welcome to the program.
Yeah, g'day, Jack. Thanks for having me.
Before we begin, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, Grant?
I'm turning 40 next year. I moved from Dorrigo to Coffs Harbour when I was about 13. I think it was 1994. My father had worked at a sawmill out the back of Dorrigo, Briggsvale Sawmill, and it burnt down. And anyway, that's what forced us to move, was for him to look for work. And then throughout that process, I guess it wasn't long after I moved down here that I started to experiment with drugs. And that was in the form of smoking marijuana. I can't remember whether it was at the end of year 7 or somewhere around the start of year 8, but I was still fairly young when I first started to smoke. And I had a group of mates, and we just started to smoke a bit of dope on the weekends here and there. We'd have a few mates staying over at a friend's house or go camping out the back or something like that. And that's how we sort of started. Before I knew it, it was sort of every weekend, and then it'd be through the week. And then it wasn't very long at all. It would have been by the end of year 8 and into year 9 that I smoked every day. And I would smoke before school, at lunchtime. It'd be like it would just sort of rule my life, sort of revolved around that, and the same, and all of my friends as well.
Do you recall that moment, the first moment, if you can recall, when you first kind of encountered the dope, as you say?
Not really the first moment. I can remember smoking it for the first time with my friends, and one of my friends got it off one of their older brothers, and and I can still remember doing it. And I think it was just one of those things where a lot of kids tried around that age. And for me, I guess it just became more of a lifestyle and a way of life. That was where I felt I fitted in. When things start out, you don't become addicted to them because you're not getting enjoyment out of it. There is a level of enjoyment there. And to start with, there's not, let's say, the addiction so much, and that need or that dependency on drugs or anything like that. It's all about the experience. And, I enjoyed it. That's why I did it. I probably realised that I had a problem even in the early times. By the time I was sort of, 15 or 16,
Yep.
I was smoking dope every day, all the time. My girlfriend at the time smoked pot with me as well. It was just what I did. Everybody that I hung around with would do the same thing. It was just a really big part of my life. Yeah.
Did smoking dope lead to other drugs, or did you always just stick with dope?
I guess, does it lead to other drugs? I guess I already had the predisposition in my personality to try other drugs as well. Through those early times, I was already starting to binge drink. I wagged a lot of school. By the time I was in year 9 and 10, I never made a full week of school. I would take a couple of days off at least, if not several. Sometimes I'd take more, days off the week. And I went to a public school, and no one really worried about it much, if you know what I mean. My parents were quite concerned about me, but they were busy working, trying to provide for the family,
Yeah.
So I just sort of carried on, doing what I was doing. And then I guess it progressed over a period of time. It was mainly just the drinking and the smoking. But by the time when I turned 18, I started to use some ecstasy on the weekends. I didn't ever seem to have a real problem with it. I would go out and get on the weekends, and then, at that stage, I I had a job. I got a job working for a supermarket company when I was like 9 months. And I actually worked for them for 23 years. I only ceased working for them in 2019. So throughout my journey of my addiction, I would be, and my partner of, that was my partner for 13 years, referred to me like this. She said that I was a high functioning alcoholic addict. So I was able to revolve my life around the drugs and the drink, yet still, function to a degree. Semi-function in a normal community type of role, I suppose you would say. Hold down a job, father some children, still pay the bills, obtain a mortgage, always pay my mortgage, and all of those sorts of things. Tried acid and got onto that a few times, and the speed and cocaine. Like I'd sort of tried everything. Magic mushrooms. We would get onto those and try those as well. So there was nothing that I sort of didn't try. And I would go to raves when they'd be on around the area, and it'd be nothing to sort of take a couple of pills or a few pills, and also have some acid and maybe a couple of bit of speed. Smoking weed the whole time and drinking and that sort of thing. So, there was always sort of a combination of things going on when I was partying. But the one constant for me was I always just smoked a lot of dope. Probably when I was in my early 20s, I started to get a little bit of anxiety around it sometimes. So I knew that I had a problem because I couldn't give it up and I couldn't stop, but I actually had a couple of panic attacks. And I still would persist with the smoking the dope. No, righto, I need to stop a bit. I need to slow down. But then as soon as I wouldn't be stoned anymore, I'd want to be smoking again,
Yeah.
And that was just how it was. It just was like that all of the time. I didn't really class myself as having a problem with alcohol at that stage, but it's sort of come to light recently on my journey through rehab and things like that, that there already was a problem there. So when I'd say I was going out binge drinking, from an early age of, 14, 15, 16, I'd go halves in a bottle of spirits or halves in a carton of beer or something with my mates. And that's, we'd go out and do those sorts of things. So I didn't see that as a problem, but when I look back and go, well, that is a bit of a problem. We're going and doing that every weekend with your friends at that age and drinking for one reason. I was drinking to get drunk, and lots of things came about with that too, whether, I'd end up fighting a lot. I wasn't any stranger into getting into a bit of a scuffle and things like that. Just all of the things that come along with it, just that risky behaviour, whether you're in cars with mates drink driving and you might have an accident, just all of those things that come along with it. I was always, I guess, involved in that, the risky type of behaviour that comes about with using drugs and drinking at a young age like that. Oh, something that I should touch on too, actually, is I had a bad accident when I was in my 20s. I got burnt really bad in a petrol fire. I ended up in Royal North Shore Hospital for like 2 months.
Right.
I got burnt to like 75% of my body, and anyhow, so that's just another big thing in my life that I believe probably wouldn't have happened if I wasn't involved in the drinking and the drugs and that sort of thing. So when I look back and reflect on life these days, anything that was a real major, significant fucking swear, let's call it a fuck up, generally revolved around my substance abuse. You go back and look at any milestone of agony in my life, it always revolved around substance abuse. That was just the pattern for me. After that, still smoking dope, still drinking all the time, but I ended up getting into a relationship with a girl, and anyhow, she didn't like me smoking the weed all the time. So I sort of thought, oh, well, maybe the time's coming, I'll stop. Now, here's what I did though. I started drinking every day. So before that, for me, as I said to you, because I've worked all the time and I worked, I was quite reliable. I could smoke dope all the time, but if I went to bed, I'd get a good night's sleep and I'd get up again the next day, smoke some cones, I'd be fucking laughing, I'd be right ready to go. I knew, though, that if I drank over a long neck, this is for me, if I drank more than a long neck, I didn't feel sick or anything the next day, but I'd feel sluggish to not want to get out of bed sort of thing, if you know what I mean. So I might have a long neck with my mates or something after work. But, I wasn't the sort of person who always had a carton of beer in the fridge and I'd drink every day or anything like that. I'd still binge on the weekends. And, when I went out, it'd be nothing to have, 20 standard drinks type of binging type of thing, like really getting into it. Back then, let's say if I had, this is going back, if I had $20 to spend, I would have spent it on marijuana before I would have spent it on alcohol. Because I had been smoking so much for so long, the withdrawals for that were really bad. I did not sleep very good for, and I'd say a couple of months, and just sweating it out, really bad dreams. It was a really hard period.
You're listening to Wellbeing, where we're discussing the experiences of living with a drug dependence. My guest today is Grant, who has experienced a drug dependence, most notably with marijuana, from his early adolescence until recently.
Through that time, I began to just drink every single day. And I'd start drinking a 6-pack or whatever. And throughout that period of time as well, I also started to get an addiction with poker machines. Okay. So I was going to the club more. So the partner that I had at the time didn't like smoking, was okay with the drinking. It was okay to go to the club and play the pokies and put the money through them. So my addictive personality took on that form. Once that relationship ended, now I'd become an alcoholic. Oh, well, I'll go back to smoking the dope as well. So then I started smoking the dope again every day, and I was an alcoholic as well on top. So through that period, like I said, I didn't use a lot of ecstasy and other drugs and things like that. As I said, I didn't have a problem with them. They were just party drugs, or if I'd go and do something, that was never my, real issue. But then over the next 10 years, over the next 10 years, things really progressed for me. And it was the alcohol that became the real problem. I started to home brew at home, and that was the beginning of the end in some ways. I did in bottles to start with. And then after about 12 months, I progressed and I started brewing in kegs. And I was pretty efficient at it. In a couple of hours, I could... I'd have me worts brewing there. I'd have them emptied into a couple, because I had 2 at a time, 2 20-litre ones going into me kegs. I'd have it washed out, another lot all done, ready to go in about 2 hours. So that was equivalent to making 4 cartons of full-strength beer in a matter of about 2 hours, and I could do it for about $20 as well. So then that enabled it very easy for me as well. Throughout that period of time, those 10 years too, I grew my own dope. So that was very cost effective as well. So they were things that I guess for me enabled my addiction, but they also kept me away from other things. I said I still class myself as quite high functioning, because it did not financially cripple me or my family or burden me in those ways. So these are the things where, for me, and this is probably a really important part to touch on, this was me in denial of going, well, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm okay because I pay the bills, I go to work, and I do all of these other things. It's not like I'm not feeding my family, or we're worried about the power going out, or we don't have cars to drive around and things like that. So this is me fooling myself going, you've got it all under control, mate. You're living the dream, it's all no dramas. As I was growing up, I'd always pictured, like a lot of people do, I wanted to have a family. Yep, have some kids and be able to support my partner, to have some time off to stay at home with the kids, get a job, to have a mortgage, just all of those simple things. Yet now I'm here and I'm involved in all of this. It's not enough for me. I'm not happy with it. I'm actually finding it to be a burden on me. And that's quite selfish behaviour that comes along with addiction, I suppose, as well. And it's hard to say whether, feeling trapped and having those responsibilities was something that I was trying to escape with the addiction, or whether the addiction was not letting me see things clearly either. Because when you're drinking all the time and smoking dope and that, you don't have a lot, you do have energy. I kept going, but things are a hassle. You're not a full functioning person. You're not, as much as you'd like to think you are. You're not. Throughout that period of time, I got addicted to codeine. That was actually quite an interesting little path as well. So as you would remember, before February 2018, you could just buy codeine over the counter. for whether it be, I remember the first time that I actually discovered taking the codeine tablet. So I went and stayed with my sister. She was living down in Sydney, and I'd got on the piss. I might have drank like a bottle of whiskey. I know I did. I drank a bottle of whiskey.
Yep.
Anyway, we were going to the zoo and stuff the next day, and I woke up in the morning. I was like, I've got a chronic headache. And my sister just goes, I got some Nurofen Plus. Have these. I had a couple of Nurofen Plus. I'm like, wow, they work really good. It wasn't that anything else happened. It's just like, wow, they're a really good painkiller. That works really well. So then I started taking them. And then all of a sudden, before I knew it, I was taking them every day. And then I was starting to take them like I was actually at work, and I would wait until morning tea time, and I'd be like, oh, righty, I'll just have a banana and have them with a glass of milk, because I knew that they weren't very good on an empty stomach, and that would make them work a little bit better. And then I started taking more of them, more and more, and then I also found out that then I started going to the doctor too, and I was getting scripts for Panadine Fort and Mercendol Fort and things like that, because I learned and then I started getting the paracetamol and codeine, because I learned that you could actually crush that up, mix it with some water, and then stick it in the freezer. And what would happen was the paracetamol would solidify, at let's say 2 degrees or something like that, and all sink to the bottom. Yet the codeine doesn't. So it's all sitting in this milky wash at the top of the water. And I used to drink that off the top with a straw. So then I was able to get more codeine into the system without wrecking my liver with the paracetamol. This is my theory behind the whole thing. So I had this codeine addiction that started to progress over a period of time. And then I also got addicted to the benzos, to Valium, so benzodiazepines, and I got into the Xanax a little bit later on. And so once again, that was quite that was what you would call an innocent initiation onto those as well. I was at the doctor for something else, and then I said, I've been feeling a bit tense, a bit uptight, a bit of anxiety. And I said, we'll give you some Valium, he said. And at the start, I didn't even know, I didn't even think about it too much. I had a Valium, and I was like, oh, yeah, wow, how good's that? So then I'm thinking, I'm mixing my codeine with a couple of Valium, washing them down with some whiskey. So that's where things progressed for me as well. So I was brewing home brew for a long time, and I was drinking the beer. And then I started drinking on the spirits a bit more. And as I said, I was growing my own weed and things like that. And so, I wasn't spending a lot of money, but I'd buy a few bottles of spirits. And in between having beers, I'd bloody have a mouthful of whiskey. I never had a glass there or anything like that. I'd literally just pull it out of my homebrew fridge, knock back a bit in between beers, and that started to progress for a period of time. And then I can even remember times, this is how bad things got for me with the pills. And I would go to work for the day, and I might have, some a couple of Nurofen Plus and a couple of like Panadine Fort or something, like I said, in the morning or in the day. And then in a little container in the car, I'd have like, a couple more, like 3 Nurofen Plus, 3 Panadine Fort, 2 or 3 Valium sitting there. And I'd dead set come out of work, buy a long neck on the way out, and I would wash that down with a long neck on the way home before I'd even get home. So before I'd get home every day, I would literally take a handful of tablets, wash them down with a long neck. I'd pull up it, and I would literally go into the home brew fridge, like I'd have a glass cold in the fridge. I'd pour up a schooner, drink that, and then I'd pour another one to sit on to go away with. So within the first half an hour or so of me finishing work, I would have had a handful of tablets, polished off a long neck, had a schooner out of my homebrew when I come home, and then be sitting on a beer. Or I would have a couple of mouthfuls of whiskey that was sitting in there or something like that as well. So I was starting to progress pretty badly by this time. And I would smoke a couple of cones. So I guess I started to get pretty messy by this stage, as you could probably imagine. And I don't know how my partner put up with me. I guess she could see that I wasn't a bad person by any means. I was just as she put it, a high-functioning alcoholic/drug addict. That's what I was. In 2015, I had a pretty bad dirt bike accident. And anyway, it was pretty bad. I was off work for 4 months, it was, in the end. And anyway, throughout that time, my drinking and my drug use got worse because I also was getting prescribed endone through that period, which is quite a strong opiate painkiller. So then I managed to add that into the mix of things that I was taking as well. And for that whole 4 months when I really should have been focusing on getting better and recovering after an accident, I literally just took the opportunity to drink as much as I could.
You're listening to Wellbeing, where we're discussing the experiences of living with a drug dependence. My guest today is Grant, who has experienced a drug dependence, most notably with marijuana, from his early adolescence until recently.
One of my mates that I knew, he was home brewing his own moonshine, and he came around with like two 2-litre bottles for me. I still remember that. So as I said to you, still a lot of my friends and people that I hang around with were still, I guess, alcoholics and drug addicts themselves, if that makes sense to you. So that was sort of, still a big part of my life and the type of people that I wanted to hang around with. So I did get pretty messy and pretty bad with the drinking and that through that period of time. Anyhow, what I also found was that my behavior when drinking was starting to deteriorate as well. I was becoming a little bit more unpredictable, more aggressive, I guess things had progressed and they were becoming just worse and worse. There'd be more times that I'd wake up and I'm going, oh, fuck, what have I done last night? What have I done here? And just then the depression and things really started to come along with that as well. I guess because I was acting out in ways that were very much against my values. That also just caused me a lot of stress and turmoil inside. And I was really suffering from bad depression and anxiety from it and things like that. However, by this time, I would say there was a period of 10 years there at least where I didn't go a single day without drinking. And there may have even been more years than that. And it would be nothing to be drinking 10 plus standard drinks a night through the week. And then on my days off, the night before that and the next one, I'd drink 20 standard drinks type of thing. That would be a very, very regular occurrence for me through that period of time. I also found out that I'd have blackout periods that would last much longer. So I still remember when I first started to binge drink, and let's say I'd have go halves in a bottle of spirits or something like that and drink it too quick. I would never end up with memory loss. I would end up sick before I would encounter any type of memory loss. I couldn't drink that amount. But then as I progressed, I guess you get used to the alcohol and your body can tolerate it. And then, to drink to blackout was quite easy for me. And then more so and more so and more so. Through that period of time that I spoke about before at the height of it all, I would literally not remember what I'd had for dinner 3 or 4 nights a week. I'd wake up through the night feeling crook, or wake up in the morning and I'd be like, oh, what did I have for dinner? Oh, did I do anything to piss my partner off? Is everything okay here? I was living in this state of just heightened anxiety all the time around what I'd been doing and what my behavior would have been, because I couldn't remember. I literally would just not remember all of the time. And anyhow, I learned something further on down the track, because I did end up getting some drug and alcohol counselling, and it was actually quite interesting. The drug and alcohol counsellor said to me that over a period of time, if you start to drink that much, you damage the brain a little bit. So what happens is, it's not that you can't remember. Your brain doesn't write down the memory to start with.
Right.
So you can be there functioning and doing something. However, you actually never write down that memory to recall on it. So if you think of your memory like a big filing cabinet and you whip through the files and you pull it out and you have a look at it, you literally do not have that file there to call upon. And so that, when you starting to get told things like this, it also becomes a little bit scary as well, because, I'm that addicted to what I'm doing that I'm damaging my body, my mental health, my physical health, my relationships, everything in my life is just in turmoil. However, I just can't stop drinking. And the worse things became, the more I would drink. And the only way that I could see to cope with the chaos around me that I was causing was to drink more. That was my solution to the problem, was to drink more. So it just became a really nasty, nasty little spiral. So with it too, I got to periods of time there where I would end up drinking that much for a period of time that I was so sick and so dependent, and my mental health was so poor that I'd ended up in the mental health unit about 4 times, and got detoxed while I was up there. But then as soon as I got out, I would just start to drink again a little bit and slowly just spiral back down into what was going on. So in about 2018, I had a pretty significant event in my life. It was actually with my best mate that had been my best mate for 20 something years. And I ended up getting into a fight with him, and it was his ex-partner at the time. And I ended up getting 2 aggravated assaults occasioning bodily harm. And there was another person there, and I got a common assault put on me as well. And anyhow, that was the introduction to the first time that I went to rehab. I've attended rehab twice, and that was the instigation for that first round through rehab, because like I said to you, my behaviour was deteriorating, and in the end, that was a pretty bad thing that happened to me in my life.
This was the first part in a 2-part episode looking into the story of Grant's relationship with drug dependence. Thank you for listening. I'm Jack Hodgins, and all of us at Wellbeing wish you well.